Looking into downtown Scranton, we're treated to a view from a perspective that most locals don't even know exists, much less get to enjoy. From where I'm standing, the sands of time seem persistent on standing still, or at least moving slower than the space around it. Today, tourist trains from Steamtown and the short line Delaware-Lackawanna make daily trips past this location. Looking at it from the outside, it's known as the China Wall. But inside the small, well-maintained mini park, you can literally take a walk through local railroad history. You can actually walk between the very rails that steam and streamlined diesel locomotives that pulled the famous Phoebe Snow once rested on. At one time, the Delaware-Lackawanna and Western's premier passenger train made regular stops here while the passengers boarded and dismounted. The spectacular Lackawanna station still stands, and it still serves its original purpose as a hotel, even though it doesn't serve it for the railroad anymore. Today, the Lackawanna station is now the luxurious Lackawanna Hilton, and the boarding tracks, though still visible in some places, have mostly been paved over. Down the hill at Steamtown, a visitor from south of the border cools its heels in front of Tower 60 after lugging in a heavy unit sand train earlier in the morning. 3 foreign visitors, in fact, from 3 different countries mingle with the local DL power in the still mild morning air as another hot summer day of rail fanning begins to heat up. Those 2-bay covered hoppers are part of the train 60M that our NAFTA power brought in through the morning darkness. Such unit trains are a pleasant once-in-a-while occurrence that often bring with them some foreign and sometimes even exotic power. Take just a week ago when yet another train 60M came to Steamtown, much like today's, with an NS SD70M-2 and not one, but 2 Union Pacific behemoths and a still under construction Frankenstein 4047. By now, you probably already know that the AC-44 C6Ms on NS were born as DC Traction -9 models. The 4047 started out as the standard cab 8781 in 1995, and if you look closely, you can see the original number hiding behind the stenciled on new number. One of the coolest things about the power on this day is that it was left in start-stop mode, which means that the locomotive start up and shut down automatically as needed. And when the engines fired up like this big ACE did, it did so in full notch 8, and as you can hear for yourself, it was pure locomotive bliss. Back to the present, the NAFTA power had moved up the hill near the China Wall and was tied down with its train. The slight elevation of the mini park in a parking garage gives us a nice look at the trio at rest. Back down the hill again at Tower 60, the rest of the DL was carrying on with their day as usual. 5 of their finest are maneuvering their way through the divider switches as these engines will cross over Lackawanna Avenue, move down the Strawberry Hill connecting track in reverse direction to go south back down to the shops at Breck Street. Unknown to me, the NAFTA power would be shuffling around the area, albeit with a DL crew, that entire day, and by the time I found out about it, the power had made its way to Taylor Yard, worked the yard, and had made it back up to the north leg of the Steamtown Y where it went into emergency. Apparently, this had been happening all day, and the conductor is walking the train to check for broken or disconnected air hoses. Having found no issue, the NAFTA power, now operating as the train DL3, reverses back into Steamtown. Because this train was moving really slow, and because it was made up of mostly look-alike dull-gray 2-bay covered hoppers, I opted to cut it short and gave you the best parts in the interest of time. Next morning, the sun doubled down as it was low enough to create harsh, troublesome shadows and still hot enough to make me uncomfortable. Have no illusions here, I don't like the winter, but being too hot isn't any fun either, unless of course the heat is coming from the exhaust stack of a high horsepower diesel locomotive, as was the case with the Daily 11Z as it made its way south from Binghamton to Enola. What got me out for this particular train was that standard cab Dash 8 leaser trailing third. As you've learned from previous videos, standard cab Dash 8s are now non-existent on NS and super rare throughout the rest of the industry, so seeing one operating in Class 1 mainline service nowadays is scarce, and for me, it was just too irresistible an opportunity to pass up. I was aware of the power on the 11Z, so the Dash 8 wasn't exactly a surprise to me. What I was not aware of was that the NAFTA power was sitting over on Bridge 60. I'd expected it would have left out in the darkness of night, heading north back to Bingo Town and then back out west from there, but for some reason, the power was still in Scranton on day 2 of our little adventure. Nowadays, it's become common for the DL to utilize the power that comes in on unit trains to Steamtown. Today's power is doing just that, performing switching maneuvers throughout the morning and into the afternoon. By the late afternoon, the NAFTA power was still on the job at Steamtown as it lugged in the day's pickup from Taylor Yard a mile to the south.
DL3, okay, ahead. All moving DL3, got about good 5 to go 5.
The rear of the train is still out on the Sunbury line as the power and crew will now sort out the manifest. Since the locomotives were out of sight, I didn't stick around any longer, thus it would be the last time that I saw the NAFTA power here in the Northeast. You learned in the last volume of this series that springtime means tech trains on the main line, but they often show up in the summertime too, as was the case with Train 903 heading northbound with the Brick's unusual sister, the number 34. Summers and ice cream go together like railroads and rail fanning, but ice cream and railroads? It doesn't sound like a winning combination, but when you factor in that one of the locomotives on the railroad is the creamsicle, it becomes a lot more attractive to the senses. The Interstate Heritage Unit had made several passes through the area throughout the summer. Today, it's trailing second on Allentown to Buffalo train 37T. When the interchange with the Norfolk Southern returned to Taylor Yard from Portland, so did the tradition of moving grain in and out of the city. SPG used to be the symbol used for unit grain trains to and from the Ardent Mills processing plant in Mount Pocono. However, now that happy days are here again in 2018, these trains became the PO-74 and PO-75. And so the tradition continues once again as long and heavy grain trains growl their way out of town. It's a hot summer Saturday morning, and we're set up on Ridge Road to watch as 6 of DL's 4 and 6 axle grunts claw their way up and over the summit. The train will travel northeast for a few miles and then turn sharply to the south to Mount Pocono. A few minutes after the grain train disappeared, Steamtown resumed business as usual with the Scranton Limited excursion train chuffing up the hill. Because the train caught me by surprise, I wasn't able to get set up fast enough to record the uphill trip, but I was able to capture the train drifting downgrade back to Steamtown. Doing the honors is their Baldwin 060 light switcher, the one that I like to call the Jolly Green Giant, that name being rhetorical, of course. And although she may be small on the outside, her fire burns hot on the inside, which is an accurate metaphor for where we are in this summer escapade. We now have 3 down with 2 to go, but it only gets hotter from here, and I hope that I'll see you on part 4 of this year's special summer series. There's really nothing that I enjoy more than catching old fallen flags out on the main line. And as we push further and further into the new millennium and farther away from the days of railroading's past, reminders of yesterday's railroads become more and more rare. Today, a sharp eye and a fast reaction time enabled me to capture a little bit of that history. As you may know, the Illinois Central Gulf became a part of the Canadian National last century, and their bulkhead flat cars are a common sight moving between Montreal and Harrisburg. Usually, these cars are solid black, but today an orange one mingled in the mix and gave me a small but meaningful blast from the past. Like any surviving fallen flag freight car, this flat car is riddled with the scars of time, but even the rust and faded paint couldn't hide its true heritage and identity. As an added bonus, here's an alternate view of that Train 37T.